So today we'll be talking about the four tissue types: epithelial, connective, muscle, and nervous. So the whole human body is made of one of these four types, or as in the case of connective tissue, what they build. So a connective tissue cell would build like tendons and ligaments and bones, things like that. So human bodies are made of cells and the products that cells make, as we already know. So a tissue is a group of cells that are similar in structure and function. Okay? You might want to know that as a definition. Similar in structure and function. There we go. So characteristics of epithelia, this is kind of important. Cellularity means that, there are a lot of cells and they're packed closely together, and that there's very little extracellular or intercellular space. They have polarity. As I think I told you before, but let me just quickly show you. When we say that they have polarity, what we mean, or what they mean, is this. There's a top surface, that's called the apical surface. A bottom surface, right? That's the basal surface. And the sides are the lateral surfaces. Now the apical surface is the surface that's called an anatomical surface, which means it's exposed to like air or a tube, or it's a surface. So like your skin is a surface. So this is exposed to air. And in your digestive tract, this is exposed to the tube. Does that make sense? Yeah. So cells have a definite top, bottom, and sides. The bottom is the basal, top is the apical, and the sides are the lateral surfaces. Most of the cell-to-cell junctions are on the lateral surfaces. So attachments, since there's very little intercellular space and these cells are very closely packed together, they're perfectly designed for making sheets like fabric to cover your skin, to cover the inside lining of your digestive tract, tubes. We have lots of tubes in our bodies. Epithelial cells are perfectly made for that purpose. So obviously the cells have to be attached to each other. I'm not very good with this pen yet. So the cells are attached to each other to maintain a solid sheet, which in the case of the digestive system is very tight so as not to allow food to enter the abdominal cavity. The next one, kind of important, is that epithelial tissue is avascular. So the blood supply has to come from the underlying connective tissue. Connective tissue has blood vessels running through it. So your capillary would be down here and the nutrients would diffuse up. But if this is more than one layer and this is the apical surface, then the fluids from the capillary has to like leak up through here, or maybe even go into this cell and then go into that cell. It's a little bit more difficult for these cells to get what they need. Regenerative. These are highly mitotic cells, so they reproduce rapidly in most cases and throughout the lifetime. Throughout your lifetime. Throughout. CROUT U, G, throughout lifetime. Highly metabolic. These cells are taking care of themselves. They're usually secreting things. A specialized epithelial cell is a goblet cell, which secretes mucus. They secrete all of your hormones. They secrete salivary juices, all the cells in your stomach, like the hydrochloric acid, all the cells in your pancreas. These are really highly metabolic, and they manufacture and secrete a wide array of chemicals for your body. Some are chemical messengers like hormones, and some are enzymes, and some are just pure acids, some are just mucus, and some are serous membranes. Many different things like that. Okay, so basement membrane, a sheet of epithelial cells has this basement membrane down here on the bottom, and it has two portions. Part of it, and if this is a fiber that this secretes, it's like thread, and you're taking a needle and you're threading it along the base of all of these cells. If this is a row of cells, then these cells will secrete this protein, which is sort of like thread here. Okay, and then the connective tissue down here creates another set of proteins that are like threads, and it ties these two layers together. So the basement membrane has these two components. One is manufactured by the epithelial cells, and this is called the basal layer, and the other by the connective tissue, and that's called the reticular layer, and together they're called the basement membrane. So what we want to know about each of these four tissue types, we want to know their characteristics, their functions, what they look like, how to identify them, and where they are in your body. So the functions of epithelial are protection. Obviously you have a sheet, and things don't pass through very easily, so that's good protection. And in the case of skin, there are many layers, so there's great protection there. Secretion, as I just mentioned, hormones, saliva, all kinds of things. Absorption, this happens in the kidneys, and it supports sensory receptors. Like you have sensory receptors in your fingers. They're held there by the epithelial tissues. So we have two main types of classifications: simple and stratified. Very simple. This is one layer, and this is two or more layers. Very simple. And then the other classification is by shape, and that is squamous, which means flat, kind of like that. Cuboidal, like a cube. Or columnar, like a column. And I have lots of pictures for you. So I wanted to mention again, this is a columnar cell. You see how tall it is? And you see these cells are very tightly bonded to each other, so there's very little space in between. And your capillary is down here in the connective tissue, so this cell gets plenty, but if it's stratified, then the cells up here get less nutrition than this basal layer. So this is usually the germinal layer where mitosis occurs. And then these are the different junctions that hold these things together. We have gap junctions, and this is where something can pass through from cell to cell. There are different places in the body where this is necessary. We have desmosomes. This is like a button. It's a they call it a plaque, or it's like a button. And these threads are like thread, and you just tie these two together. Then you have tight junctions. They're like these rows of buttons here. There's a close-up right here. This keeps the lateral surfaces very tightly bonded together, and this would be in your digestive system, because you don't want any of that food to get into your peritoneal cavity. And then here's the close-up of the desmosome down here. Okay, you can take a look at this slide. These are the different types of junctions that occur in epithelial tissues. So here's your simple squamous epithelial cells. These are actually skin cells that have been teased apart and stained so that you can see what they really look like. So if they're separated like this, we can call them simple squamous, but they're taken from a stratified squamous tissue. Does that make sense? So these are teased off of the top layer of skin, which is a stratified squamous, because skin has to be tough. But it's an interesting picture. There aren't too many pictures like this. So the real simple squamous epithelial cells are these cells here in orange. And when they line blood vessels and they line alveoli, then they're called endothelial cells. Up here, where is it? Endothelial. Okay. So this is a blood vessel here. This is the lumen. This is where the blood is. So this is an anatomical surface. So on an anatomical surface, we're going to have epithelial cells. And the particular cell here is a simple squamous and is called endothelial tissue. Okay. This is another picture. It's the exact same thing. This has some red blood cells in it. So you can see that this is a blood vessel. And it's not in a living system, so this has collapsed. Usually it would be more round. But you can see this endothelial cell here. This is the nucleus of the endothelial cell. The nucleus, you can even see organelles. But it goes on these cells like this. And these are ideal for this purpose. These repair easily. They're mitotic. Since blood vessels have a tendency to get damaged, you want an epithelial tissue there because they're very mitotic and they can repair themselves, whereas connective tissue is not. So moving on to cuboidal. This is simple cuboidal, one layer of cuboidal cells. You can see that they're like a cube. Here's your basement membrane here. This is your apical surface here, and this is the lateral surface, so you're going to have a junction here. These are usually tubules or ducts. That's a duct. And here is the lumen. Lumen is the space in a tube. So again, apical surface, basal surface, lateral surface, simple cuboidal. This is the nucleus. Okay. So these are present in kidney tubules, ducts, secretory portions of small glands, and the surface of the ovary. Okay. Now moving on to simple columnar, you can see that these are taller than they are wide. Again, here's our apical surface, basal surface. You're going to have basement membrane down here, right? Lateral surface, and your junctions are there. This is a duct, and some features. Sometimes not in this particular, not in ducts, but in the trachea and the nose, you're going to find goblet cells. These are for absorption and secretion. This looks like it's from a kidney. So these cells are working on the filtrate to make urine. The non-ciliated, because columnar cells can be ciliated or non-ciliated, and they can also have villi and microvilli. But the non-ciliated type line the digestive tract and the gallbladder, and the ciliated type line the small bronchi, the uterine tubes, and some regions of the uterus. So let's move on to pseudostratified. This is the esophagus. I thought was interesting. This is a see, I did well. It's sort of yeah. This is stratified, stratified squamous epithelium. I just thought it was an interesting picture, but you're not responsible for it. Okay, here's skin, stratified squamous epithelium. Here's your basement membrane here, right here. This is called papilla, and this is what's underneath your palms and soles and makes your fingerprints. It just helps to reduce friction. When you get a blister, that'll happen here between the connective tissue and the epithelial tissue. So blister. You get the blister gets full of water, but you still have your epithelial layer on top. And here's the surface, the apical surface. By the time the cells move their way up, which takes about a week, these are all dead up here. And they're full of keratin, which makes them very tough and almost waterproof. So here's just a closer picture of thin skin. And this is a cross section of ducts. It's kind of interesting because this would be in the seminiferous vesicles and the male reproductive system. These are stratified cuboidals. This is a stratified columnar. Now there's something different in stratified columnar. Just wanted to bring this to your attention. This is a lumen. Again, this is stratified columnar. In stratified columnar, you'll notice there's a layer down here that looks cuboidal. See right here? As these divide and move towards the apical surface, they change their shape. But they're still called columnar cells. So you have to look at the entire tissue to see what it really is. And this particular slide you'll be responsible for. It's very easy to see a layer here and a layer here. So this is stratified columnar. The apical cell defines what the entire tissue is. Okay? So even though these look cuboidal, they're really columnar. Okay, so this is transitional epithelium, and transitional, try to find this with my pen, okay, transitional. These have a very special purpose. Transitional epithelium are in the bladder and the uterus, the ureters and part of the urethra. These expand. These are crowded in here so that when the bladder, for instance, when it fills up, these will stretch out and make a thin layer. And it's very easy to identify because they look like bubbles. The surface is rounded. The cells are rounded up here. Again, this would be the apical surface. And it looks sort of like bubbles to me. And that's kind of how I look at it. So this is a pseudostratified columnar cells with goblet cells. These are specialized cells called goblet cells, and this is cilia. These are hair-like. Okay, these aren't extensions of the protoplasm as in villi. This is hair-like, and they wave. Okay, they move. They have an actual motor protein that moves them, makes them wave-like. And this is in your nose and your trachea, and it moves mucus and dust towards the outside of your nose so that you can blow it out. So this is pseudo-stratified. It looks like it might be what do I want to say? Stratified, but it's pseudo-stratified. That means it's fake stratified. Every single cell goes down to the basement membrane, even though it looks like it may not. Okay. See, there's a cell here, and that's not a goblet cell, but these are lots of goblet cells in here. That's not a goblet cell, that is a goblet cell. And again, a goblet cell is an epithelial cell. It's just specialized to secrete mucus. Okay, here's another one. If you see cilia up here, and this is cilia, and a basement membrane, and kind of tall cells, and you see that the nuclei are at different levels, right? So that's one other way to tell. The nuclei are at different levels, whereas in regular columnar epithelial cells, they're all the nuclei are at the basal surface. Well, that's a beautiful pseudostratified right there. This is a goblet cell. This this slide they're trying to show you actually two things. This is smooth muscle here. This is the best slide of smooth muscle I've ever seen. But these are stratified squamous epithelium. So these are endothelial cells. These are little nuclei. All of this. It's a beautiful picture. This is the lumen. Beautiful picture. So connective tissues. There are three categories: fluid, which are blood and lymph; connective tissue proper, which is loose, dense, regular, and dense, irregular; and supportive tissues, which are bone and cartilage. So the functions of connective tissue are for binding and support, protection, insulation, and transportation. That would be in the case of the blood and the lymph. Now, this is like glue. Connective tissue is simply like glue. If you built the muscles and the organs and the bones in the body, you had all the empty space in between all that stuff, and you just turned a person upside down, cut their feet off, and pour glue in, that's what connective tissue is. So here's this model, cartoon, of connective tissue, and you can see it has these three different fiber types: elastic, reticular, and collagen. Collagen is thick and it's relatively clear on a slide. Elastic, they're going to be crooked in some way. They're not exactly, this windy. And the reticulars are long and spindly. They're also made of collagen, but it's slightly different. Then you're going to have nerves within this tissue. You're going to have these white blood cells, macrophages, lymphocytes, neutrophils, and plasma cells. These are all white blood cells, and they crawl through your connective tissues and looking for pathogens. Then you have this ground substance, which I like to call gel. They call it many different types of things, but it's like Jello. And in some cases it's thicker and stronger than Jello, and in some cases it's looser. Okay? So here's what it looks like in reality. Here are your reticular fibers right here. And your collagen are these more diffuse. You can see them everywhere here. And then trying to find some elastic. Here we go, elastic right here. So it has everything in it, and these are all the different white blood cells. And then you'll find an actual fibroblast which manufactures all of the gel and all of the fibers, and that could be this guy here. Okay, there's another picture of it. Very easy to see. The stuff that looks out of focus back here, that's the collagen fibers. These are reticular, and you can see the elastic one here. Here's some elastic. And that is a fibroblast, and a fibroblast creates all of this matrix. This is fat. Very easy to identify. You can see the cell membrane, you can see the nucleus, and this is all fat. Okay, this is reticular connective tissue, and this is found in the spleen and lymph nodes. So this is reticular, kind of loose reticular. So remember, there are three portions to connective tissue proper, and those are the cells, the fibroblasts, or chondroblasts, or osteoblasts, or hematopoietic stem cells. Hematopoietic means that they make red blood cells. You have this gel or matrix, and that's made of proteoglycans or glycosaminoglycans. You don't need to remember that. And then different proteins. And so the ground substance is just this sticky, thick, gel-like substance which holds the fibers and the blood vessels and the nerves and everything else. Just know ground substance. And three types of fibers: collagen, elastic, and reticular. And then the cell types are fibroblasts. That makes connective tissue proper. The chondroblast, chondro means cartilage. They make cartilage. Osteoblasts make bone. Hematopoietic stem cells make blood. And then the white blood cells as well. So connective tissue proper embryonically does come from mesenchyme. That's that middle layer of the embryo, and it gives rise to all the other connective tissues. So this is also called loose areolar tissue. I knew at one time what areolar meant. Air-like, a lot of spaces. So this is loose connective tissue or loose areolar connective tissue. You might see it written either way. Okay, this is fat again, adipose tissue. So connective tissue proper, one of the loose is areolar, and adipose tissue is considered loose as well. Adipose and fat, that's the same thing. Then we're going to go to dense, regular connective tissue. Don't mess this up with muscle tissue, because in muscle tissue you're going to see striations in this direction, but everything's in the same direction here. These are the nuclei of the fibroblasts. So this is obviously tendon, okay, and it could be ligament as well. Ligaments have regular and irregular fibers because they have to take stresses in different directions. The stress can only, it's strongest in this direction. If you try to put a stress in this direction, it's not as strong and it can break. Like tendons rupture all the time. If you're doing odd movements, like Kobe Bryant was trying to twist his ankle around and just popped his Achilles tendon. So this is dense, irregular connective tissue, and this would be ligament. This is typical ligament. And I like to say dense, irregular, connective tissue. You'll see it written that way in certain places. This is, again, just a cross-section of dense irregular. This is bone tissue. Bone tissue is very typical. It looks like the trunk of a tree. This is osteocytes. These things right here, these are lacunae. A lacuna is like a tent or a hut in which an osteoblast lives. Okay. Also, chondroblasts live in lacuna. Chondroblasts live in lacuna. The plural is lacunae. Okay, so here are all the living cells. They secrete this matrix, and the nerve, artery, and vein live in here, or run through here. Okay, pretty simple to identify. Here's a closer view, and we'll look at this, in far more detail when we get to bone. This is hyaline cartilage. Just very simple hyaline cartilage, and you'll find this in your ribs and in your joints. Again, these are chondroblasts or chondrocytes. A blast is a cell that makes this matrix, and a cyte, C-Y-T-E, chondrocyte, is the mature cell, and this is the lacuna around it. So this is elastic fiber, elastic cartilage rather. So you can tell it's cartilage because, again, we have the typical lacuna. We have nuclei. This is lacuna. So look for the lacuna, and then all these elastic fibers in here. Okay, all elastic fibers. So this is elastic cartilage. Elastic cartilage. Okay, this is also elastic cartilage, but it's less dense than the last one, and it has kind of a glassy surface. So you can see that it's cartilage because you have lacuna, right? And the chondroblast in here, and then you see fibers everywhere. Okay, moving on to muscle. There are 3 types of muscle, right? Skeletal. These are the ones you're familiar with: biceps, triceps. And this is under conscious control. And the features of this, the cells run the length of the entire muscle. So they're very, very long, and they're tube-like. They're like a straw. Okay? This is a nucleus, and the skeletal muscles are multinucleated. Since they're so long, they need more than one nuclei. Because if this gets damaged, the structure in here gets damaged, it needs to be repaired, and you need to get the blueprints out of the nucleus. And then you're going to see these bands here, and these are called striations. So this is a striated muscle. Extremely easy to identify on a slide. So that's your skeletal muscle. This is a neuromuscular junction. This is a beautiful, beautiful picture. I don't know how they got this. Neuromuscular junction. So as the word says, neuromuscular. A muscle cannot contract unless it has a signal. And the signal comes from the nerve. This is the nerve. And it attaches to the muscle fiber. This is one muscle cell. And you can see this is the neuromuscular junction. And this is a fantastic picture. That's how a muscle gets the message to contract. This is cardiac muscle. And the difference between a skeletal muscle and a cardiac muscle is that a cardiac muscle has one nuclei per cell. That's one difference. The second difference, if you can see, the cell comes along and then it branches. So it has branching. I always like to ask this on exams. So cardiac muscles branch, and the other thing is that they have, boy, if I can't see them on here very well. Well, here's one. It's called an intercalated disc. And the intercalated disc, wow, I wish I could see some more. They're usually pretty prominent, but I'm having trouble seeing them. Anyway, they look like this, and they're all over the place. So that might be one there. Okay, intercalated discs. These are where an action potential allows a faster movement, because all of the cells of a chamber of your heart have to contract at the same time. So you need to find a way to depolarize all the cells together so that they'll all squeeze at the same time. So intercalated discs, branching, and one nuclei per cell are characteristic of cardiac muscle. Now here's another picture of it. Here are the intercalated discs here. So here's one, here's one, here's one, here's one. Okay. And the last muscle is smooth muscle, and this is the best picture I have, so you'll see this on your exam. These are the nuclei. So smooth muscle, you have smooth muscle. This is a. If you see tissue here, it's not going to be connective tissue. This is going to be smooth muscle. So kind of easy to identify. I'm going to use this slide in particular, and these are found in the walls of hollow organs. Okay, here's some more right here. These are the nuclei. These cells right here be endothelial cells, simple squamous epithelium. Good, and this again is striated muscle, and these are all of the motor end plates. These dark bands you see here, these are the nerves. And then you have an axon coming out here and bonding to the plasma membrane of this muscle cell, and then one here, and one here, and one here. Beautiful, beautiful picture. This is skeletal muscle. Okay, and this is a nerve, and I just thought I'd point out all of the different features so that I can ask them, on an exam. These are dendrites. Dendrites are extensions of the body, which are sensory, and they bring in an action potential or information towards the cell body, and then it goes out the axon. So the current runs only in one direction, towards the cell body from the dendrites, okay, and out the axon. This is a microglia. This is a supporting cell. So if you see microglia, you know that this cell is in the central nervous system. This is, again, cytoplasm, nucleus, nucleolus. What's special, the only thing that's special about nerve cells is that they have these Nissl bodies, which is rough endoplasmic reticulum, which help in the action potentials. The place in the cell where the cell body meets the axon is called the axon hillock. See, these are astrocytes. These are glial cells. There are two types of neurons or nerve cells in the body. There are neurons, which are your primary cells like this. Then you have these supporting cells, microglia, astrocytes, oligodendrocytes, Schwann cells, and ependymal cells. So here's just some nerve cells. They're very easy to identify. This is one in the central nervous system. It looks like a spider starfish. So this, if you take a cut through a bundle of nerves, so a perpendicular cut, you can see this white stuff here is fat. So this is a myelin covering. This is all myelin covering around this single axon. There's another one. And a bunch of axons that run together are called a nerve. So this is a nerve. In cross-section. This is also a nerve in cross-section. This is a Schwann cell. Do it with the pen. S-C-H-W-A-N-N. This is a Schwann cell. This produces myelin, which wraps around, myelin, which wraps around the nerve. This could be the nerve here, and it increases the velocity of an action potential. And then here, you see, it goes like this, and the next one goes like this, and then there's a space right here. This is called a node of Ranvier. And this allows for saltatory conduction, which we'll go over in the nervous system. But this is a beautiful picture of Schwann cells. And this is an oligodendrocyte, so Schwann cells only occur in the peripheral nervous system. Those are the nerves that are outside of your central nervous system, outside the brain and spinal cord. And oligodendrocytes are the same thing, but they're in the central nervous system. So here's the cell, but it will myelinate many different axons and dendrites. And here's an actual picture of an oligodendrocyte. Pretty fascinating. Okay, and that's it.